Now here is Emmett McGraw, the gentleman you saw kind of hobbling down there, who is very well today, thank you. Emmett McGraw was a victim of a very tragic accident back in 1973. Doctors thought at that time it would incapacitate him for life. He has made it back with a lot of help, a lot of love, and a lot of love from the gentleman sitting next to him, Stephen McGraw, who was an actor, owner of a restaurant, bar, cabaret in New York City. And this all happened in 1973.
Right.
You were driving a Volkswagen.
Mm-hmm.
What set the scene here?
I was driving a Volkswagen down a highway, beach highway up in New Jersey, and an Impala, a drunk driving an Impala, crossed the line. He was going 80, I was going about 45. He rammed into me.
Okay,
so
he rammed into him. Take a look at what happened after that. If we can, well, we can't. We've got a shot we're going to show, and we shall in a second.
Picture of the car, right.
Why don't you describe what had happened?
Well, what happened, you know, the Impala ran right over top of the VW, just cut it right in half. Emmett was pronounced dead on arrival. By the time they got him out and got him to the hospital, a phone call, the police called my parents at about 3 in the morning and said they had to come down to identify his body.
Now we can see what you're talking about.
It's a VW right there. Emmett was driving it. As you can see, there's no left wheel, there's no steering wheel left. The door they just laid up there.
Yeah.
And his arm was outside that door. His arm was almost severed off.
Now, what were you doing at that time? Where were you?
I had just graduated from Notre Dame, where I majored in math and computers. I was offered a job in Washington, which I turned down because I decided I didn't want to do that in life. And I was going to go back to Europe and just drink beer and put pills in bottles. I went over there my junior year, and that's what I was doing. Then I studied over there.
You were notified by who?
Well, I was sleeping at the time. I was living at home, and my mother came in and said, "Take care of the family. We have to go down to the shore." And she didn't say anything. And then suddenly phone calls started coming in. We were piecing it together. And Emmett was, well, by the time my parents got down there, they said Emmett had a heartbeat, but they better rush him to a place that can deal with someone in Emmett's condition.
Now, the condition was not good at all.
No.
What had happened to you? What were the injuries? What did you sustain?
Well, I sustained very severe whiplash. Very severe. I was hitting the head over here. And I had burr holes up there.
Well, they operated. His damage was severe brain damage.
Yes.
When they came up, his first EEG was flat, which is brain death. And then the next one came back a little. He had brain stem damage, which is the worst possible type damage, and he had severe left hemisphere. But the point of the book and the point of this story is the fact that the doctors know as much about the brain as they know about the moon. They've landed on it once, basically. They haven't.
Well, yeah, why don't you say what the prognosis was? What did the doctors tell you?
Oh, they said he'd be a complete vegetable. I mean, a complete vegetable. And there was really no hope. They kept him alive. He had pneumonia 3 times, but they said he would never function again in society, and, you know, with the damage that he sustained.
Okay. What happened from that point on? You heard that he was not going to really be able to live a life, is the news you had received.
Well, at this point, we started to go to the hospital, to the intensive care unit. We could spend 5 minutes a day. Emmett was totally unresponsive. What the doctors would do, they'd come in, and the doctor was a brilliant doctor. I mean, it's not in their formula. If they can't operate, what can they do? They can't recreate a brain cell. And so obviously they're pessimistic. So we put Emmett in the normal hospital, and I stayed with him 15 hours a day, where I played music, I moved his arms, I moved his legs, I read him newspapers, I spoke with him.
Okay, now the physical part was sustained and was stagnant for some reason.
Oh,
and you needed rehabilitation, of which they said wouldn't help, right?
Well, they said their attitude on life was, if you fall off a boat 4 miles off the coast and you can only swim 2 miles, why even start to swim? Emmett is never going to function. Leave him in this coma state almost. It's more merciful. Now,
Emmett, what were you do you remember a lot of this, or because of those injuries, is this all?
What he said in the beginning, I don't remember because I was in a coma. But then I remember when I came out, I was in a rehab center. So I remember a little bit of that.
See, what's different is this is not a Hollywood coma where you wake up 4 days later and you say, "Kill him, Rocky."
Yeah.
This is different. Emmett, they said that if you put a watermelon in the back seat of Emmett's car, if the watermelon wasn't damaged, every seed would be moved about 1/millionth of an inch. Well, that's what happened to every one of Emmett's brain cells. There was massive confusion. It wasn't Emmett trapped in a body. This person was reduced to a 1-2-year-old. He had aphasia, amnesia. He was in limbo. He was in a state of a zombie. He couldn't speak. He was totally blind. He was totally paralyzed. I mean, you're speaking...
Well, okay, now with all of that, and the doctors on top of that saying Emmett is just not going to recover from this, what made you so intent on trying to help him?
You know, it's been asked before, and I think it's ignorance. The doctors see 100 of these people all the time, and 100 fail. I've never seen that, and I know Emmett, and I know he's a tough kid. And so in the beginning, I just worked blindly, I think. And I was maybe looking for things, but I did start to see things. After a while, if you came up to him and you said, Emmett, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand, you'd get a slight squeeze with his left hand. But then my father would come up and say, Emmett, if you're praying to God and you're fighting to make it back, squeeze my hand. He would squeeze, but the doctor said he doesn't really understand what you're saying before that.
But on top of all of this, there has to be a tremendous amount of will from the patient.
Oh,
so you had to have an incredible desire.
Well, I tell you, when I came out of the coma, I was hit so hard in the brain that I was about 2 years old again.
So it was an instinctive desire.
So what you know, all the workout I did, I really wanted to do, but he dragged me there. You know, it's like dragging a 2-year-old to a gym every day.
The therapy that I finally went into was massive stimulation. One of his first moves, one of his big ones was, this was about after 3 months, his eyes were moving. Sometimes they'd open a little bit, but believe me, he couldn't see, or he couldn't respond. He said, how many fingers do I have? You get nothing. Well, after about 3 months of doing nothing, I saw his eyes moving. They were active one day, which they say is not uncommon for someone in his state. And my mother came in, and I told her, you know, that his eyes were moving. Well, I don't know if she got tired or what she did. She just went over and she grabbed him by the shoulders. This was after 3 months, and just started to shake him, pinned his head, pinned his eyes, and said, who am I? And he sort of went, Mom. It was one word, one breath, and that was his real first movement that he could see, but he doesn't remember it. He has
But you
no
knew
idea.
what you were doing was working.
It was instinctive, it was stimulation, and that's what we did after that. I took him out to, University of Penn was right there. I took him out to the cafeteria to see the kids. And
Okay, once things started to progress, then you had kind of, I would imagine, a twofold situation. This is very hard for me to do, and do I want to continue on with this in your own mind? Did you reach a point at that? Here was your brother, you know, pulling on for dear life.
Times.
And you were, was there a point where you said, just leave me alone?
Frustration. I go through that right now. You know, anybody's paralyzed, because you look at all the reports, hardly nobody comes back from being paralyzed. Hardly nobody. And so it's a matter of frustration.
What are you doing now?
I'm working down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for Save On. It's a janitorial and shampooing company.
And in terms of your ability, in terms of your physical abilities,
I can clean.
you feel fine, you're in a physical job?
Drive my own car. I can do anything anybody else can.
Now, what did the doctors say, the same doctors who said he's not going to recover? What did they say now?
well, you have to realize, even when Emmett said the frustration, that came 2 years later. Emmett was in such a zombie limbo state for almost 1.5 years, 2 years. And so the doctors, they say it's a miracle, but it's not a miracle that happened overnight. It was 2 years. And they have 50 Emmets, and since then they've had 500 Emmets. And so that's, you know, they can't get caught up like we did. They can't say, you spend 15 hours a day with your brother and he's going to make it back. So they say it's wonderful. They say it's that 1 out of 100.
Did you, in the progression of all this, have goals that you would try to attain weekly to get him to move his arm? Or did you just work on overall
No,
patient rehabilitation?
Well, I wanted that little inch. You know, he had 100 miles to go, and every day if I'd get that
That's
little
the way
inch.
you do it.
Yeah, and it was to the point I would do sit-ups with Emmett. And if he could do 5 sit-ups the first day, with me holding on, pulling him back and forth, I would do 6 the next, and that would be a big thing for me.
When did the split come? You live in New York, you're down in Fort Lauderdale. There had to be a point, which must have been very difficult for you, to now leave each other.
Okay, yeah, Mom, yes it was, but I moved to Jackson, Mississippi, where I went to school. My older brother lived right there, not near me, about half hour away. So I could always get in touch with him. Then moved back up to New York with him.
Yeah, the therapy was to get him on his own. So after about 1.5 years, 2 years, we went down to Jackson with my brother on Today's Inn. And he was matriculated into a college, and then I went right to New York City. And he was on his own.
How many in the family?
Well, there's 5 boys and 1 girl, and that includes myself.
But you took it upon yourself to be the person who dealt with Emmett.
To say that Emmett was
One-on-one.
lucky would be kind of foolish, but he was lucky in this sense. My older brother was married with 2 kids living in Jackson, Mississippi. My sister was an airline stewardess. Then it was me who just graduated. A younger brother was 12 and another brother was 4. I just graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I had a lot of energy and no place to focus. And when this happened, I became obsessed with getting him back on his feet. And I took all the energy, you know, which was dispersed, and put it right into Emmett. But through that, I learned, you know, now I know what I want to do. I want to act and I want to write. And it was in that hospital that I discovered it. I guess I was always a latent actor writer.
Yeah.
And seeing these people quadriplegic. And
Now, you put a book together.
yeah.
With a lady named Frances Rickett. It is called Total. It is based upon,
Yeah.
but it is not the story.
Yeah, it is. Litigation.
Of Emmett, is it?
Oh yeah, it's based. It's I don't know. It was based on a screenplay, which is totally autobiographical. Except there's some When my parents read the screenplay, they said, "Well, this is not it." And I said, "Well, I have to put people through in 2 hours what you went through in 2 years. So you have to remember, I have to condense it." And the book sort of follows the same format as the screenplay. It's all true. Everything in it is true. For litigation reasons, because there are some doctors that I wasn't very fond of, and some of the procedures that
You change things.
they thought it was safer.
In terms of the rest of the family, you seem to have been, in this case, the liaison, because you were with them at the most. Did you have a tough time with the rest of the family?
Oh no, they were very supportive, you know, extremely. In fact, when we went home, they worked as, you know, right along with me as best they could.
A fascinating story. The book, as I said, is called Totaled, based upon you, sir. Emmett McGraw, we thank you. It is good to have you here.
Thank you.
We wish you much success, as we do you.
Thank you
Stephen,
very much.
thank you both for joining us. And we will be back in just a moment.
In all the world.